Can you change a team's culture in 6 weeks? Because I think that happened.
You are Locked On Trojans, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Fight on, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Holkin, and thank you for making Locked On USC your first listen every day. Whether you're going to watch this show on YouTube or wherever you want to download your podcast, never forget the show is free, and never forget how much I appreciate your support. If you're watching on YouTube, become a free subscriber. It's quick, it's easy. Click the subscribe button, smash that thumbs up. Don't forget to hit the bell notification button. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers, you're going to get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. It's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. Question. How do you go from one of the worst defenses to competent in 6 weeks' time? I went back and I checked some of my notes from back in August. I went back even further into spring camp. This was obviously a time when we were allowed to watch a little bit more of the practices than what happened towards the end of the season. And what I saw in the spring, as well as fall camp, there was a ton of fundamental drills and live tackling drills, all the stuff you want to see going on during practice, going on. However, for whatever reason, that it just never showed up on the field, right? We all watch the games. We're like, man, do they practice tackling? Have they ever met a tackling dummy? I mean, I put the stuff out there on social media. I've shown you video of those guys out there practicing. So you know they worked on the fundamentals. Anyways, it's just crazy how they went from complete ineptitude to literally being able to wrap up at the point of the catch, minimize or just stop the yards right there, outright. It's all of a sudden like this team was one of the best tackling teams in the country. I kept seeing players like Prophet Brown and Anthony Beavers just make tackle after tackle after tackle. Those guys, at the beginning of the year, since they've been at USC, they've been further down the depth chart. They were a member of the 2020-21 recruiting class. We're going to talk about that a little bit during the show. Keep an eye on that, especially in the next segment. So, why? What changed between the end of the regular season and the bowl game against Louisville? Was it because higher rated players during this regular season were being played over players who maybe should have been playing? I mean, let's not be naive here, right? Coaches have their favorites, and there's a lot of politics that go on, especially when you're recruiting the high 4-star or 5-star players. It's almost like they need to be on the field. Look, Malachi Nelson, he's not at USC anymore. Damani Jackson, he jumped into the transfer portal. So I guess what I'm saying, there's kind of an admission that when you've got your 5-star players on the field and they're not performing, is that because the coaches can't admit that, they misevaluated their talent, the players they brought in? It's not just them. They're not the ones who rate these players coming out of high school, but this is why I don't like to use the star rankings. I mean, like I said, if you bench a 5-star player who, for somebody who wasn't as highly regarded, like a Prophet Brown, are you admitting that you guessed wrong when you put in the player who wasn't as highly as recruited? So I don't know, at USC, was it a player problem? Was it a coaching problem? Or was it a culture problem? I think it's yes, and yes. You can check off each one of those boxes. There's plenty of room to say you can You could probably fit each one of USC's problems into each one of those closets, into those categories, and you could make the argument for it. So is Taylor Mays, like the next great up and coming coach? We always talk about young coaches out there on the horizon you should keep an eye out for. Is Taylor Mays one of those guys? Because his USC's tackling was on point. I can't emphasize that enough. And apparently he was in charge of tackling during the bowl prep. So were the players who were available just more hungry than the players who played ahead of them during the first 12 games of the regular season? Obviously guys who didn't get to play, once they get their opportunity, are going to be hungry. I mean, it's kind of a rhetorical question, but were they being held back? I've noticed that there's been a common theme, a narrative, so to speak, that keeps getting repeated throughout the postseason. If you've been watching the bowl games, when the TV announcers are talking about the competitiveness of the games, the ones that they're calling, and they're talking about all the different opt-outs for whatever reason, whether players are going to the NFL, jumping into the transfer portal, whatever the reason may be. They always bring up the talking points that the coaches told them during the week leading up to the game, that it's how these players really wanted to be here and how important it was for them to be able to play in this game. I spoke about it last week. For USC, those players have been, Taj Washington, Max Williams, Jude Wolfe, Chris Thompson Jr., Austin Jones. Each of them are leaving USC, either going to the NFL, jumping into the transfer portal, eligibility is up, or whatever. None of those players had to play in this game. They wanted to. And Coach Riley talked about it post-game. This is one of his quotes. "We're really proud of this group, proud of the leadership. This is significant for the guys that have been here in the beginning of this journey. And there's been a lot of great moments in the first 2 years. Now, they're going to get a lot better, and it's going to get a lot more fun as we go, but it had to start somewhere. And a lot of the guys in the locker room were a part of that. A special thanks to the guys that stayed around, because it was important to them, because the team was important to them, because USC was important to them. A special thanks to the coaches that did it. It was not an easy situation, especially for some of the coaches on our staff, and our coaches, especially our defensive guys, did a hell of a job tonight." After the game, when the microphone got to me, I asked Coach Riley, "Earlier in the week, you talked about Louisville's defense and how good it was, specifically their red zone defense. Can you put into context what your offense was able to do tonight?" They gave up, Louisville gave up 16 passing touchdowns on the season. Tonight, you scored 6 passing touchdowns against that same defense. Coach Riley said, "We played well. That's a good defense. They weren't like a few of the other side of the ball where, they weren't decimated by, wouldn't say decimated. They weren't affected by a lot of guys holding out or different guys not playing. That was pretty much the same unit that we saw all year. For our guys to make some of those plays, it was great. Some of the competitive plays." So he answered that part of the question specifically, but there was actually more. He went off script a little bit, and he continued. He got into the culture part of his answer and reinforced when he said, just again, the entire vibe of the sideline felt different. You could tell the guys were just playing for one another across the board. You just felt it. You felt the defense wanted to make plays for the offense. The offense wanted to make plays for the defense. If one of us didn't make a play or we didn't score or stop them, all right, the other side has got to get a hold of, has got to hold up their end of the bargain, and we did that all night. A lot of credit to those guys. Quickly, I snuck in a follow-up because he said it felt different. So it was different on the sideline. I said, was it different on the sideline during this game compared to the regular season? Coach Riley said, at times, yes. Yes, I think these guys would probably agree with that. Like I said, the player leadership in this game and in the last 6 weeks was really, really strong, and the team reflected that in their performance tonight. End quote. Look, in my very humble opinion, that might be the most candid response from Coach Riley all year long. What do you think? Was there a culture problem in 2023 with this team? Because that last line there, like I said, I think the player leadership in this game was, and in the last 6 weeks, was really, really strong, and the team reflected that in their performance tonight. Think about all the players that weren't in this game for one reason or another. Give me your feedback. Hit up the comment section on YouTube. The NFL season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on with the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers, you're going to get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app is so easy to use, and they have so many different ways to bet. Like, you want to do a same-game parlay, you can do that. You can find bets in the new Explore tab, and you can make a parlay in their Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and they got a whole bunch more. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make your first bet an easy score. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering every league. So go to Locked On Sports Today. It's on YouTube, and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. You know, there was a lot of really good things that happened in the Holiday Bowl. I told you, I'm going to stretch this good feeling out, this vibe that everybody was feeling, for as long as I can. And if you can see, that's kind of what this show's all about. You know, what changed the vibe? And I talked about it. I mentioned it in the first segment. I'm going to talk about it much more here in the second segment, the class of 2021. There were quite a few players who really impressed, kind of popped. So for me, I'm going to go over some of the players that caught my eye. But who impressed you? Again, audience participation. Make sure you give me some feedback. I mean, the obvious answer, everybody is going to say, well, Miller Moss, right? He stole the spotlight. Well, when you're starting at quarterback for the first time and you're going up against Louisville, who had one of the better defenses in the country coming into the game, and like Lincoln Riley said, Louisville played most of the starters during the regular season. They had very few guys who were missing from that roster, at least on the defensive side of the ball. And that's a defense, again, I need to remind everybody, throughout the entire regular season, they only gave up 16 passing touchdowns all year. That included their conference championship game. So when Miller Moss goes out there and throws 6 touchdowns against that same defense, you kind of popped. You had your coming out party, right? Miller Moss had not started a game since, I would say, in high school back in 2019, because 2020 was a COVID year. And he got caught in between where he was going to transfer to Mater Dei from Bishop Alemany, and that didn't happen. So he just ended up enrolling early at USC. So again, he hadn't started a game since 2019. So Miller's coming out party is why Cam Ward has declared for the NFL. It's why Will Howard is making Ohio State probably have to pay through the nose for his services for 1 year. I highly doubt he's still coming to USC. Miller Moss introduced himself to the country. Back in the beginning of the season, fall camp, I kept mentioning Anthony Beaver's name, only because he was passing the eyeball test. He looked like he was ready to become a player. He was huge, still is. One of the biggest safeties on the team. I mean, he's built like a small linebacker. And by small, I just mean, he's what, 6'2", 215, 220? It's not your ideal prototypical linebacker, but he looked like one out there. And the way he was playing again in the Holiday Bowl, that's what he reminded me of. Anthony Beavers was one of four safeties that signed with USC's 2021 recruiting class. Kalen Bullock, All-American, Anthony Beavers, Zamarian Gordon, local product from Downey, and Jalen Smith, the game's defensive MVP. And they also brought in another player through the transfer portal, Alfred. Why is the name escaping me right now? Alfred. Last name, Alford. I apologize. Anyways, when you have an All-American playing in front of you, Kalen Bullock, your playing time is going to be limited. And that's kind of where Beavers found himself. He was backing up Kalen Bullock at the free safety spot. Now, in 2023, he played 20 snaps against Nevada, beginning of the year, 22 against Stanford. These were blowout wins. And then he played 39 against in the crosstown showdown game against UCLA. He played 40 snaps in the game against Louisville. Now, those were a season high. And I mentioned this last week, but it bears repeating. Pro Football Focus gave him an 80.9 or 80.8 grade, which is a career high. And in terms of Pro Football Focus grades, Beavers was USC's number 1 defensive player, the number 2 run defender, the number 2 tackler, and the number 1 coverage player. He finished with 5 tackles. 3 of them were solo tackles. And obviously he had one of the highlight plays of the game, that textbook, violent punch out of the ball that sealed the game. Where you had everybody running into the end zone, and you had Jacoby Covington coming back. We a team now. Next year, you've got Kalen Bullock and Max Williams. They're gone for sure. They're declared for the NFL. Not sure what's going on with Bryson Shaw yet. And you've got Zion Branch and Christian Pierce returning, plus a bunch of other young guys coming in that USC bid on in their 2024 recruiting class, finger quotes. And don't forget, USC's got a couple of safeties coming in through the transfer portal. Achille Arnold from Oregon State, Kamari Ramsey from UCLA. However, I'm thinking, USC's moving into the big conference. You need to be physical. And he did really good with run support. I'm going to find a way to keep Beavers on this roster and on the field and make him part of the package next year for USC. He is a player who I think opened a lot of eyes. He just needed some time. Another guy, Prophet Brown. Another member of that class of 2021. Miller Moss, Anthony Beavers, Prophet Brown. I think that class, at least as far as the Holiday Bowl is concerned, paid off big time, right? Prophet is, again, that 21 class had a lot of names in it. Corey Foreman. Prophet was maybe, I wouldn't say one of the less heralded players, but he wasn't one of the higher ranked players. Good athlete, though. Really good athlete. Now, neither Damani Jackson, who's going to Alabama through the transfer portal, or Christian Roland Wallace, who declared for the NFL, they weren't available for the game. Those are the reasons why. Jacoby Covington, the other cornerback, he was finally healthy again. Sear Wright, he wasn't with the team for personal reasons. So Prophet Brown got to play a lot. In fact, about 72 snaps. That's a lot of snaps for a cornerback in a game. And let's just be honest, that is by far the most he's played in any game in his time at USC. So he was putting in his time. He was making up for all that lost time. I've been really high on Profit since he got to USC. Like I said, pure athlete. I always thought, you know what, if he's not going to be able to make it a cornerback, throw that dude in the running back room, because I think he could play the position. I keep going back to Pro Football Focus. They gave Profit a 70 grade, 70.0, which, by the way, is better than any grade Damani Jackson earned throughout the entire season. Just saying. Goes back to my point where players were favorites being played ahead of players who maybe should have been played. That's all I'm going to say. In the bowl game, Prophet Brown was targeted against 5 times, and in those 5 targets, he gave up 3 pass receptions. Guess how many yards? 10. I'll take that trade-off every single game. Do that every time, and you're going to be a lockdown, shutdown corner. You're not getting any yards. Again, his tackling was just on point, solid. Like Miller Moss, I have to think that Profit is probably a front runner now for the starting job in 2024. Taj Washington, he added 2 more touchdowns to his career totals at USC. Again, one of those guys who wanted to play in this game, had nothing to prove. But you know who did have something to prove? Freshman Jacoby Lang. So while Taj closed out his Trojan career with 2 more, Jacoby got the first 2 of his career. And let's not forget, he wasn't at USC in the spring. And he barely played during the season. He's definitely got his red shirt still in his back pocket if he ever needs to use it. After this game, I don't think he's ever going to have to use it. He finished the game with 90 yards. But more importantly than his yardage total, which tripled what he did throughout the season, it's how confident he was playing. You could see it when he was out there. The way he conducted himself, the way he carried himself. Remember that end zone celebration at the end of the game? He was the offensive player greeting everybody coming back to the rest of the team on the sideline. Athletic freak of nature. I remember watching him in one of his personal workout videos. I think it was like a 6-foot vertical jump from 2 feet up onto one of those. I don't know. He jumped 6 feet up and landed on 2 feet. Amazing. He's in, what is he? 6'4", 6'5", long, great hands, really good dexterity. I mean, he can catch the ball falling down, which he showed during the game. So, again, another player who kind of had his coming out party. We had already known about Zachariah Branch and Deuce Robinson. We saw a little bit of Mekhi Lemon playing cornerback. Well, we saw what he can do playing wide receiver. Here's another player. And I don't know if we want to call it his coming out party because he's been playing a lot since he's been at USC, but Jalen Smith. Why I'm including him in this category, players who kind of, popped, because that was by far his best game as a USC Trojan. Is that all it took? Was just, 6 weeks with hanging out at Camp Taylor Mays, learning how to tackle? Was that all it took? Jalen Smith, I mentioned that he was the game's MVP on the defensive side of the ball. He led all players in the game with 12 tackles. All of them were of the solo variety. And that's why he earned the Defensive MVP award. Again, class of 2021. Oh, here's another member of that 2021 class. Kyron Hudson. Again, honorable mention for this category. He's just one of those steady guys. He's never going to be flashy or stand out or put up the big numbers. I don't know, maybe 2024 is his year, but he stood out in the Holiday Bowl, blocked the punt, and then on the ensuing offensive series, he caught that bullet over the middle for a touchdown. Not bad. So again, all those players, class of 2021. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer for others to show what they're capable of. Sometimes they're held down for reasons that, they got to play other players above them because they're ranked higher. Whatever the case, they got their opportunity. And when opportunity knocked, they opened the door. They walked right on through. Let's see if they can carry that over into 2024 now. All right, we're going to flip it around a little bit. We're going to put the football down. We're going to talk a little bit of basketball before we get out of here. Look, I hate saying this because I'm a huge Coach Andy Enfield fan, but I'm not sure how much longer he's going to be around at USC as their head coach. The men's hoops team is having a really, really, really rough season. Right now, they're under 500. They just opened up conference play. They're 6-7, and they were swept in the state of Oregon. They looked terrible to open the game against Oregon. They played it better in the second half. They made the game competitive, but it was just another game where they weren't prepared, ready to play. Lots of turnovers, bad shooting, poor defense. This team is a turnover machine. And it, at least from my point of view, from my seat, it appears that the guys who need to be leading this team, they're kind of just looking out for their own stats. They're not leading. The Kobe Johnsons, the Boogie Ellises. I mean, it's the lack of passing when they're on offense. That's how you kind of. It's one of those intangibles you look for. How do you know that they're not playing as a team? Well, when you're not moving the ball, when you're not passing, when you're not trusting your teammate, they average what, 2.5 passes per offensive possession. Now, I know some of that is due to Isaiah Collier. I'll get to that in a second. This team needs. They have the talent to get to the basket and score and shoot from the outside, but they're not coached to play that way. This isn't the Loyola Marymount teams with Paul Westhead as the head coach, when Bo Kimball and Hank Gallers were putting up 140 points in Michigan. That's not what this team is built for. This team is built to play defense first and then to play structured offense inside out. They don't do that. They don't look like any Andy Enfield team since he's been here for 11 years. If I'm Coach Enfield right now, you gotta make the super phenom, the number one player in the country, Isaiah Collier. You gotta make him play more disciplined, or you gotta sit him down, put him on the bench, because he is a turnover waiting to happen. He's got like a 1-to-1 ratio. Not good. Like I said, all he does is he puts his head down. He tries to get the basket with his body. He tries to play like LeBron James. Tries to draw contact. And he does, but he doesn't finish at the rim. For me right now, the team just lacks a lot of discipline. In all phases. They're constantly fouling when they're playing defense, which means they're reaching. They're not moving their feet. And I think that's a result of it carrying over from their bad play on offense, and it's carrying over to the defensive side of the ball. They're getting lazy. And when they do foul, I'm noticing a lot of complaining, a lot of frustration on their end. You know, Boogie Ellis came back to play this year. He wasn't going to have to be the point guard. He was just going to be able to play off the ball and shoot. But, you know, he's either hot or cold. And the whole team is, for that matter. Pardon me. This is, you know, there's a lot of names on this team. Bronny James. He's probably the player who plays the most like a team player. You've got Isaiah Collier. I mentioned him already. Boogie Ellis. Kobe. DJ Rodman. Like I said, a lot of recognizable names. But they don't play as a team. Their most recent game, they lost to Oregon State. What was the final score? 86-70. And I don't even know if the game was that close. I'll be honest with you. They were being blown out. And again, that game was just a follow-up after the game in Eugene. USC was actually favored going up against the Beavers. The Beavers are a bad team this year. Well, USC is playing like a worse team right now. They're playing like they don't care. At least that's the impression I'm getting. I used to coach high school ball, for those of you who aren't aware. Okay? I recognize effort, and I'm not seeing it. So, again, I said USC is 6-7 right now. You might as well say, I don't know if they're going to make the postseason. The NCAA tournament, they are going to have to win the Pac-12 tournament to get in, because this is what they still have left on their schedule. They got Arizona twice. They got Colorado twice, Utah, UCLA twice. I don't know. Can you see right now they've got 6 wins? Do you see them winning 14 out of their last 18 just to get to 20? I don't know. That's the way they're playing right now. I don't see it happening. So here's my question. Does USC need to go 2-0 at home this next homestand? They've got California and then Stanford, who, oh, by the way, Stanford upset Arizona this past weekend up in Palo Alto. The one constant under Enfield has always been his teams play defense. But as I mentioned already, I think this team has already quit, and it's a shame. There's a lot of talent. He had finally gotten that point guard that he had been looking for since Jordan McLaughlin had left town, who's lighting up in the NBA, by the way. But this team, I don't know. In a lot of respects, it reminds me of USC football 2023. They already see, I think they recognize the prize that they were going for. It's not there. Now, again, win the Pac-12 tournament, you're in the NCAA tournament, anything could happen. And that's a long way away. But my God, start winning now. Because if you don't win those next 2 games at home, I don't know how long Andy Enfield's going to be able to hold on to this job. And I hate saying that because I'm a huge fan. Huge fan. But right now, I think athletic director Jen Cohen, she's seeing what's going on. It's like, you know what? You've got all the resources you need. You've got the players. Can't fire the team. All right. That's another episode of Locked on USC in the books. I'll be back with another episode tomorrow. That's what we do, 5 times a week. So until then, everyone, I hope you're having a great new year. I hope you enjoyed the college football playoffs. Michigan's in. It looks like Washington is in. I'm recording this episode while Washington was beating Texas. They were up by 10 in the 4th quarter. So we'll see what happens. Are we going to have an old-fashioned Big Ten, Pac-12 national championship game? And isn't it crazy that Washington is heading to the big conference with USC, and USC isn't the team playing for the championship? Wow, it's not how I predict things in the beginning of the season. We'll talk about that more during the week. So until that next episode of Locked on USC, everyone, you know what to do.